we get to the Lydian, and so that is good. And if I'm on the Mixolydian here and we go 6 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we get to the Lydian. If I make the Mixolydian the 1 and we go 7 up, counting that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7th scale degree. All right, let's do the ones in the middle now to wrap this up. Wrap it up, would you? Because this is going on way too long, no one's gonna. So it's an XX plus modal range, which is a 5.5 modal range, which would be a 6.6 scale degree. You would think. Wait a sec, that's not right. Which would be a 1 node away from the Mixolydian 0.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 1.5 scale degrees, but it's not, because we call it a 2 scale degree. So that would be a 1 node away minor second. So notice what the minor here is doing. It's saying it would be a normal second from the perspective of the major scale. All of these modes are similar to the major scale, except for the Mixolydian has that one different interval, but then we're going to flatten it. So that's why we're calling it the minor here. Over here, it's more specific because it tells you that from the perspective of the Mixolydian, this will land you in the ocean, right? So if I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 1, it lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Mixolydian here and I go up 0.5, it lands me in the ocean. If I make that the 1 and I go up 1.5, which that's the 1, and then 0.5, it lands me in the ocean. All right, so then we're going to say, all right, let's go to this one, which would be an AX plus modal range, or a 6.5 modal range, which has a distance of a 3 node away from the Mixolydian node 1.5 modal half step, which would be a 2.5 scale degree, but we have to round it up to 3. It would be a 3 node away minor third. Why? Because from the perspective of the major, which is what everything is measured off of, you would have a major third, which is 4 notes away, and we flattened it with the minor. Over here, again, it's more specific because it's telling you from the perspective of the Aeolian node, if you go up 3, you land in the ocean. This is always telling you from the perspective of the major scale whether you would land in the ocean or not, which might not be the case, of course, for the other modes. So in any case, we're going to say, okay, if I go up 4 from the Mixolydian here, and we go 1, 2, wait, no, I'm going up 3 from the Mixolydian. 1, 2, 3 lands me in the ocean. And if I'm on the Mixolydian here and I go up 1.5, I would go from here to in between the A and the N. If I made that the 1, it would be 1, 2, 2.5 would land me in between, which they call a minor third. All right, let's go to the next one. So it's an XI plus modal range, which is a 5 to a 1.5 modal range, which has a distance of a 6 node away from the Mixolydian node, which is a 3.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 4.5 scale degree. This one is a 6 node away diminished fifth, because that's normally the interval, but this is the weird, tritone interval, so I don't want to get into the weeds too much on that. But if I go from the Mixolydian and we go up 6, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lands us in the ocean. If we're going to be on the Mixolydian, I go up 3.5, 1, 2, 3 lands me in between the I and the D, which you would think would be 4.5 from a scale degree standpoint. And so that's that. Let's go to the next one. We're going to say it's going to be an XD plus modal range, which is a 5 to a 2.5 modal range. It's going to be an 8 node away from the Mixolydian 4.5 modal half steps, which would be a 5.5 scale degree, which rounds up to a 6 scale degree, but then they flattened it with the minor from the perspective of the major scale. So if I'm on the Mixolydian, I go up 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 lands me between the D and the P, which you would think would be a 5.5 scale degree, but they call it a 6, a minor 6, flattening the 6 from the perspective of what would fit in the majors. All right, let's go to the next one, which is going to be the weird one, the one that's different at least from the major. So it's an XY plus modal range, which is a 4.5 modal range. Now the 11 note distance would land you on a continent if it was the major scale, but doesn't on the Mixolydian, even though it's a major mode, right? So you have an 11 node away from the Mixolydian mode 6.5. This gives you that indication from the perspective of Mixolydian. It clearly identifies it's going to land you kind of in the ocean, right? And you would think that the 6.5 would be a 7.5 scale degree, right? But they're just going to call it a 7th scale degree. Now notice over here, the 7th scale degree is from the perspective of the major scale, because all of these notations are from the perspective of the major scale. This notation is from the perspective of what fits in the other modes, right? This is a major mode, so you would think it would be similar for most of the distances, but not for all of them. There's always going to be one distance off from the two major modes to the Ionian mode or the major scale, and this is the one that's going to be different. So if I go from the Mixolydian up 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, lands me in the ocean. If I go up from the Mixolydian here, 6.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, lands me between the Y and the X, which you would think would be a 7.5 scale degree. But they don't call it a 7.5 scale degree. It's going to be a major 7. And again, the reason it's a major 7 is not because this one isn't off because it's a flat, it's a minor. It's because we're measuring from the perspective of the intervals that will land you on a continent from the perspective of the Mixolydian mode, and all of these intervals are based on whether you will land in a continent or not if you measure from the major scale, the Ionian mode. And then so the 7 is from the perspective of the Ionian mode or major scale. The minor 7 flattens that's how it works. So these naming conventions aren't in alignment or named for the intervals related to the distance that you're on from the mode you're on. They're all comparing to the major scale. So that's going to, and I don't think that's the optimal way to do it, because you'd rather measure by distance. And I can memorize the distances that are in the major scale. That's what you would like to do. And then I can easily compare them to the distances that are not in the major scale. I don't need this major and minor thing to give me that indication, or the scale degrees to really help me with that. I should just measure it by basically the distance. That would be I think, actually easier way to do it if we did that from scratch. But that's the idea. So next time we'll go into the minor modes, which will have more differences than the major modes, right? The minor modes will be distinct from these more. And what we'll do first, hopefully if I remember, is talk about the Aeolian mode first, because that's the minor scale, the second most popular scale, measuring from this point. And then we can compare the other 2 points of measurement from the Dorian and the Phrygian, which will only have one interval difference than the Aeolian mode. That's how you want to, once you start comparing these, which we'll do later in more detail, you want to then think, okay, I want to know the differences in the distances, because that's going to give you different flavors from the Ionian, the major modes, which would be the 1, 4, 5, the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. The Lydian and Mixolydian only having one interval each that is different than the Ionian. And then we learned all of the intervals for the Aeolian, which is almost like where you just take all the majors and make them minor, but that doesn't work perfect because it doesn't work for here, so we'll get into that later. But then you can compare the other 2 minors to the minor mode, the Dorian and the Phrygian. So they still have a minor flavor because they have a minor third, but they're not totally the same. The Dorian doesn't feel, and the Phrygian doesn't feel exactly like the Aeolian or the minor scale. All right, we'll talk about that later.